this video, we'll be looking at publishing desktops and applications through vWorkspace. Let's get straight to the lab. In our last video, we imported our gold image and published that out to our hypervisor hosts, so they are now running desktops. We now need to publish those to users so that they can access those desktops, and as an alternative, publish some applications if they just want to run applications inside their standard desktop. Both desktops and applications are managed applications, and so we access the Managed Applications node, click on Add, and again provided with a wizard. So if I name this my default desktop, and we'll publish a desktop first. You can create different property sets, so I've clicked on Custom Property Set 1 by managing properties and renamed it to be Software Set. So I can say, for example, on this desktop it's running Office only. This desktop will be a desktop. You can publish applications, desktops, or even content such as your intranet site, useful articles, documents such as expense claim sheets, etc. through the client, and those can either run on the server or on the client. So if they're running on the server, the client doesn't even need the software installed, they can just fill out that form. We're going to publish this desktop as a desktop. We can then publish it to either a managed computer group or a selection of session hosts. So we're going to publish that to our default desktop session hosts and use those servers to serve up that desktop to users. Notice that some of the items are grayed out. That's because we chose a desktop, and so there are no program specifications. We will display this using the name default desktop to users. The standard icon that we'll use looks like a desktop. Would we like to create an icon somewhere for users to start that up? So if I put that onto the desktop itself. If I were using remote FX, etc., I could enable graphics acceleration. So at the moment it's disabled by default, but you can easily enable it. Should this application be available to users or not? So when you create them, generally they're enabled. You can disable them if you're just preparing it for the estate before putting it live. How do I want to load balance that application, connections to that application? So by default, not load balance. I will use my rule to load balance that application, the one I created in an earlier video. Do you want to restrict access to this application? So you can create an application restriction list that says the desktop is only available during certain hours or to certain people or under certain circumstances, and we'll look at that more when we come to publish an actual application rather than desktop. Virtual IP, do you want to create virtual IPs inside the desktop for the client for the actual desktop itself? Typically used where an application needs to see itself as coming from a certain IP address due to licensing or to maintain separate connections. Who should receive this desktop? So I'll click on Add and say that that desktop is available to all of my users. Where should I place the icon? So I'll place that in my vWorkspace connector folder, My Applications. And if we had assigned permissions through role-based access control to different administrators, are they allowed to change this application definition? So if I click on Finish, that will go away and it will create my application for me. What we'll do now is we'll go to a client desktop and show that in action. Here we are on the client, and you notice that the client has a shortcut link on their desktop. So if we double click on that, we can connect to our farm, which will show us our published applications in their My Applications folder. Click on there and the desktop will launch. So it's like my default desktop, takes over the user screen. That's the user connected to the server, and so we can start up any application we like, for example Word. which becomes fully functional. Right, let's go back to the lab and see how to publish an application to users. And here we are on one of our actual vWorkspace servers rather than on one of our broker servers or the management server. And the reason for this is there's two ways to publish an application, one using a wizard and one using the manual method, just using the GUI. So I'll quickly show you the wizard method. So we click on the app wizard, we select the managed applications node, click on the app wizard button. We can then, and the reason for running this on the actual server, is look for applications published on the start menu. So anything that starts XECOM, command, bat or piff, or you can add in your own extensions, and it will find all of the applications that sit on the start menu for this server. Now I want to publish Microsoft Word, I want to publish Publisher, PowerPoint, don't want to publish Outlook, I think I'll publish Excel as well. I can therefore remove all of the unselected items, so I'll only publish these 4 applications. Notice that I could look for a Windows installer, I could select an individual executable, I could import all of the executables from a particular folder, or I could just look in the registry for applications that are installed on this server. It takes you to a new screen when you click on next, and these are the 4 items you have to set. So those 4 applications I would like available through these servers. So servers 1, 2 and 3. I would like to create an access control group. So if I click on add new access control group, I can call this access control group Office Applications, targeting it to all of my servers because I haven't created a server group. If a user starts up one of the applications, we'll start it up maximized, and we'll enable session sharing. We'll load balance using standard rule, and we'll create shortcut icons on the desktop for the user. If we click next, it will go through and check that everything's okay. Click on finish and our application will be created for us, our application definition and the managed application. And here you can see that the applications have been created. Back on our management server, we can see that the applications are published, but they're not actually assigned to any targets. So we can click on add and we can assign the applications to our target. So I'll assign that to Anil, put it into his My Applications folder. That's for Excel, and on PowerPoint I will assign it to Anil again. Only this time I'll place the other shortcuts on his desktop. So Anil, and on the desktop, and Anil, and on his desktop. So if we go now to the client, we should be able to see what Anil sees. Here we are back on Anil's desktop, and you can see that there are no applications on the desktop. If I open up the app portal, I can connect to the Workspace farm, and you'll see that Microsoft Excel is published to Anil, but again there are no applications on the desktop. For integration with the desktop to work, we have to start up a different client, which you can set to start on Windows Start anyway, which is the desktop integrated client. That will then connect to the farm, and we're connected, and still you see no applications. And that's because if we look at our connections and come down to desktop integration, you will see that our client is not configured to allow an integration. So for the purposes of this lab, I'll just tick all 3 of the boxes, and again you'll see that no icons appear, but if we go into connect and disconnect, we can then select to refresh our desktop integrations, and our icons now appear on the user's desktop, and from there Anil can launch Microsoft Excel. So we'll just close this interface and launch the application. And there we are in Excel, running through our server. Okay, so why don't we see our other applications? Why don't we see PowerPoint Publisher, etc.? Well, let's go back to our broker server. On our broker server, you can see that the folder type for Excel, and indeed for our desktop, is the vWorkspace connector. However, for PowerPoint Publisher and Word, they're just simply published to a remote desktop folder type. For the user to be allocated the software, we have to look at the assigned resources. And here you see that this user, Anil Hunt, is assigned these resources as remote desktop folders, and vWorkspace doesn't work if it's not assigned to the user via the connector. If the connector can't see the application, the user's certainly not going to see it. So if we go into our managed application and say that we would like to publish PowerPoint to our vWorkspace connector folders, my applications, then that's fine. That will now appear on the user's desktop and in the vWorkspace connector folders. In a similar fashion, we can assign application publisher, and we would like that to appear in the vWorkspace connection folders, and we'll reassign publisher. And this time, rather than putting it on the desktop, we'll put it in a folder called apps on the desktop, and we'll do the same thing for Microsoft Word. So we'll put that in apps on the desktop, make sure that both Word and Publisher are under the vWorkspace connectors, and Word isn't, so it won't appear anywhere. So we'll go back, add that in to there, and click on apply. So if we go back to Anil's client, we can click on connect, disconnect, and refresh our desktop integrations. And now the applications appear. So PowerPoint, Publisher, Microsoft Word. You can also see the existing desktop integrations. Publish to the start menu, publish to desktop, publish to start menu programs. If we go onto our start menu now and look at all of our programs, you can see that PowerPoint appears under remote applications. So we can either start it from the desktop or we can start it from the user's start menu. So if we close the interface, we can also pin that to the start menu. And so from the user's point of view, it's now easier to locate when they click their start button. So the question we asked earlier was, there was a wizard where we could read in the applications that are sitting on the server, but what was the alternative method of creating applications manually? Let's pop back to the lab and we'll just run through that now. So here we are back in the lab on our management server in the managed application screen. So to create a new managed application, we simply click on the plus sign. Application name, let's call it Notepad. We can type in a value for the custom properties if we like. It will be a published program. We'll publish it from all servers. And the program path would be /c/Windows system 32.32/notepad.exe. We can give the user a working directory as an alternative to their home drive if you like. Server specific settings, if you've got an application that has been installed in two different places on two different servers. Display name, Notepad from server. Standard Notepad icon taken from an executable. We'll run that maximized. We'll use the vWorkspace seamless window. We'll place that both on the desktop and the start menu. No need to accelerate graphics. We'll have it enabled Use our standard bespoke rule for load balancing application. Don't place any restrictions on the application. Don't need any virtual IPs. And we'll assign that to a nil. We'll place it in his My Applications folder. Don't need to use the other folders as we've placed those from within the application itself. Next, and finish. And that's done. We have a new application created and published. So let's go back to the desktop and see how that works. So here we are back on the Nils desktop. If we come back, select Connect, Disconnect and refresh his integrated applications, Notepad from Server will appear on the Start menu. Under the list of users applications, then we should have Notepad from Windows Server. If we go back to the desktop, close that window, we can now launch Notepad. And here we are in Notepad. As you can tell, this is a Windows 8 operating system. You can probably tell that from the background and icons. Start menu, but if I go on to Help About Notepad, then you'll see that this is actually running on the server. So that's it. That's how we present up desktops and applications, a full run through. In the next video, I'll be showing you how to update your master disk. See you soon.